In my work, I talk about extreme resilience. And let's define what extreme resilience is. Resilience is our capacity and ability to bounce back from any adversity. Extreme resilience, I define, is our ability to bounce back so fast that an external person might not even know that we have suffered an adverse event. Stress is endemic in our lives, and a lot of persons talk about managing stress. And I would say that that is a very reactive approach, and we can be much more proactive by not letting it arise in the first place. Let me explain. Oh, and by the way, there are a number of people who say, oh, stress is fine. I like stress. I get my best work done under stress. And if that is your position and it works for you, fine. There's no need to do anything about it. But I'm talking about the kind of stress which people feel enervates them, it overwhelms them, it sucks the joy and energy out of their life. And I'm saying that it is possible to not only, quote, manage, unquote, it, but it's possible to eliminate it from your life. And how you can do that is a big chunk of what I'm going to be speaking about today. But let me turn it over to you, Amit. So I know you have a bunch of questions. So why don't we go in order with those questions?
Sure, Dr. Rao. Let me start with the first question. Companies talk about managing stress or stress management. There are a lot of corporate trainings on stress management going on. Isn't that a reactive approach? Can we be more proactive and perhaps prevent the stress from arising itself?
Yes, indeed, Amit. In fact, that's what I just said. We can be proactive and we can prevent stress from occurring. And this is a combination of two things. Part of it is individual mental attitudes, individual mindsets. And the other part of it is organizational structure and procedures. And I'm more concerned with the first part of it. What can an individual do to manage his or her internal state? And there is a great deal that can be done about it. Over again to you, Amit. So go ahead with your next question.
Okay, Dr. Rao, is there a relationship or the relation between stress we feel and our desire to control the outcomes?
Complete. There is a tremendous correlation between the two. Here's something that I'm inviting everybody on this call to do. Your life has been nothing but an endless quest to achieve control. Let me repeat that. Your life has been nothing but an endless quest to achieve control over some part of your internal or external environment. This is very important for everyone to understand. Most likely, you don't think of your life in this manner, but I'm now inviting you to think of your life in this manner. Everything that you do. Are you married? Why did you get married? You had in your head a vague notion, well, I kind of like this person and I'm attracted to this person. And if we get married, there is going to be love and companionship and great sex and so on. Seems like a good idea. Let's go for it. It is an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. Why are you on this call to begin with? There was the notion, well, these people seem to be well known and they have reputations, and maybe they have an idea which could help me in some way. And let me listen in, and I may be better off if I can implement their ideas. It's an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. Everything you do, if you're married, if you have children, if you have a job, if you've started a company, if you're going ahead in your career, it's all an attempt to control some part of your internal or external environment. This is endemic, our need for control. And what I'd like to share with you is that you do not have control. you never had control, you never will have control. All you have is the illusion of control. Now, intellectually, you can recognize that. For example, you can say, yes, yes, I know I have no control. I'm having problems with my marriage. I don't know if my marriage will survive. I don't have control. Or I really would like my son to get into Harvard and he has applied, but I don't know if he will get into Harvard or not. I have no control. So we kind of intellectually accept it at that level. But even when we intellectually accepted that at that level, there is inside us a very deep level of certain things will happen. Like in America, I say, well, if I run out of toilet paper, all I have to do is go to the corner grocery store or supermarket and pick it up. If I'm hungry, I'll go to a restaurant and, order a meal. Today, even those things are being called into question. So, at a very visceral level, we truly understand that we do not have control, we never had control, and we never will have control. Okay. But this desire to have control is so strongly rooted that when we see that we do not have control, we resist it, we resent it, and in that resistance and resentment, stress arises in our life. So that's how the two are intimately connected. Over to you, Amit.
Or, Dr. Rao, perhaps we have control over our responses, but we don't have control over the incidents in our life.
Well, that's a thing I frequently get, and the short answer is perhaps, but perhaps not. There is a great deal of conditioning that has got into. It is very glib to say, yes, we can control our responses, but we cannot really control our responses unless we have given a great deal of thought and effort to what our responses are, how they arise. Like, for example, if somebody comes behind you and shouts suddenly, you immediately jerk, you are startled. It's an instinctive response. You can't control it. But if you spent a long time preparing yourself for the possibility that there will be something and you're always aware that is, then when that happens, perhaps you will not respond as you did before. So it is rather glib to say, yes, we can control our responses. It is doable, but it's not a given. In other words, you have to work at it. Over to you, Amit.
Okay, Dr. Rao, we all want to be happy. Uh, do we become happier by becoming more resilient, and how?
It works the other way, Amit. You become more resilient when you are happier. We have a tremendous misconception. It's certainly true in the West, and increasingly I'm finding that it's as true in India. And the misconception we have is that I have to get something so I can do something so I can be something. So I have to get a great deal of money so I can travel to exotic places on vacation so I can be happy. I have to be in a relationship so I can have great sex so I can be happy. All of these are what I call variations of the if then model. And the if then model basically says, if this happens, then I will be happy. This is a model that is flawed. It's broken. It does not work. But despite the fact it does not work, we believe so firmly in this model that whenever it fails us, we say, oh, I put the wrong thing on the if side of the equation. All I have to do is put the right thing and then I'll be happy. For example, I thought if I got married, I would be happy. I now recognize I married the wrong person and I have to extricate myself from it with as little financial damage as possible and marry the right person, and then I will be happy. Wrong. It is not what you put on the if side of the equation that is at fault. It is the model itself. The model is broken. It does not work. In fact, I would go further and say there's nothing that you have to do, get, or be in order to be happy. Happiness is your inherent nature, it's hardwired into you. In fact, you have to work very hard not to be happy. And I'll prove it to you. I want you to think of some time in your life when you were confronted with a scene of such spectacular beauty that it kind of overwhelmed you and you felt a sense of great calm and serenity. Can you remember such an instant? Most people
Yes.
can. Perhaps a beautiful mountain, a valley, the oceans. Have you ever wondered why it happened? It happened because at that particular instance, you accepted the world exactly as it was. You didn't say, that's a beautiful rainbow, but if I could move it 200 yards to the right, it would be ever so much better. You didn't say, that's a beautiful valley, but that tree in the foreground has too many crooked branches, and you give me a chainsaw in 20 minutes and I'll fix it. No, the off center rainbow was fine. The tree with the crooked branches was perfect where it was. And the moment you accepted the universe as it was, you didn't have to do anything to experience the fullness that's inherent in you. It came out and enveloped you. I'm suggesting to you right now that all of the problems you have, your life is still every bit as perfect. With all of the problems you think you have. But we're always resisting one or more parts of it. No, no, not this way. It's got to be this way. And in that resistance, in that resentment, we are cultivating the unhappiness in our life. And I must state right away that this is a profound truth and it has also been greatly misinterpreted. Because people equate acceptance with abject surrender and lying over and not do anything. I get all kinds of pushback. We have a vaccine against polio because Jonas Salk did not accept polio. Don't I know that all of the great advancements in science happened because people did not accept the status quo, and that's why technology has given us the miracles we live with? Absolutely true. Acceptance does not mean surrender, does not mean you lie over and play dead. Acceptance simply means that you acknowledge things are a particular way and perhaps they are not the way that you would like them to be. You have a vision of the world, and as long as you have a vision of the world, it is incumbent upon you to try your level best to achieve that vision. You may succeed, you may not succeed, you really have no control over it. But the point is, even as you're trying your level best to achieve that vision, it does not affect your well-being. If you succeed, fantastic. If you don't succeed, fantastic. You have severed the if-then link. That is how you can be radiantly happy. That is how you can strive hard, work really, really hard, achieve great things, or try to achieve great things, but you do it from the space, anchored in the space that you are well and will always be okay. That is the difference. Next up.
Uh, Dr. Rao, you talk about relabeling your challenges and empowering thoughts and disempowering thoughts. Can you elaborate a little bit about them?
Uh, there is a something that we do, Omid, all of us, and that is we have a habit of sticking labels on whatever occurs to us. And the two labels I'm particularly interested in are the good thing, bad thing label. Whenever anything happens, we have a tendency immediately to decide, to conclude that it's good or bad. And we tend to use the bad thing label 3 to 10 times as often as the good thing label. So there is a very instructive story. It's actually a comes from the Sufi tradition, and it talks about a man and his son who lived in a beautiful valley, and they were very happy, but they were also dirt poor. And the man got sick and tired of being poor, and he decided he was going to become a rich man, and he was going to become a rich man by breeding horses. So he bought a stallion. Didn't have enough money to buy a stallion, so he borrowed heavily from the neighbors. And the very day he bought the stallion, it kicked the top bar loose from the paddock where he housed it and disappeared. And the neighbors came around and said, how sad, you were going to become a rich man, but your stallion has gone and you still owe us money. How sad. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That stallion fell in with a group of wild horses which were close to the man's home, and he was able to entice them into the paddock which he had repaired. So escape was no longer possible, and all of a sudden he had the stallion back, plus a dozen wild horses. That made him a wealthy man by the standards of that village, and the neighbors came around and said, we thought you were destitute, but fortune has smiled upon you. How lucky you are. He shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That the man and his son started to break the horses so they could sell them on the market. And one of the horses threw the man's son and stomped on his leg, and it broke and it healed crooked. And the neighbors came around commiserating. He's such a fine young lad. He was such a fine young lad, and now we'll never be able to find a girl to marry him. How tragic. And the man shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? That summer, the king of the country declared war on a neighboring country, and press gangs moved through the villages, rounding up all the able bodied young men to serve in the army. But this man's son was spared because he had a crooked leg. And the neighbors had tears in their eyes as they came along and said, we don't know if we will ever see our sons alive. Would you still have your son? How lucky you are. And he shrugged his shoulder and said, good thing, bad thing, who knows? And it goes on like that forever. Now, let me draw your attention to something, Amit, and this is really important. This is, in fact, one of the very important core concepts of my programs. Whenever an event happens to you, it does not cause suffering. Suffering begins at the instant you label that event. This is bad, this is terrible, I cannot bear it. Sometimes this happens very fast, but it's still two distinct things. An event happens, and in your head, you judge that event to be terrible. And the moment you judge that event to be terrible, suffering begins. Let me give you an example. You get fired. You now have a lot of free time and perhaps the opportunity to pursue something which is far more rewarding, both financially and emotionally. But you get fired and you say, oh my God, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to be able to meet my mortgage payments? Yeah, I have other expenses which are coming up. This is terrible. And the moment you say this is terrible, at that instant, suffering begins. Suffering doesn't begin when an event happens. The suffering begins the moment you label the event, this is bad, this is terrible, I cannot bear it. Now look back on your life. Can you imagine, can you recollect something that happened that at the time it happened, you thought this was terrible, but now you can look back upon it and say, hey, that wasn't so bad, or even that was good? I'm sure you can. There are dozens of such instances. Give you a famous one. There was a very good swimmer, and he wanted to do well in a particular meet. And a few months before that, he slipped on a patch of ice and broke his wrist. That's terrible, right? He thought so. He thought his professional career was over. And he went around moping and depressed until his coach told him to get on with it. So he did. But for weeks and weeks, the only thing that he could do was stay by the side of the pool and kick. And his teammates, they were practicing furiously. Then we fast forward to the actual meet. And in one of the more important events, he was behind at the halfway mark because his opponent was inspired. He should have lost that race, but he hung in there and he won that race by 1/100th of a second. It is one of the closest finishes in the history of athletic competition. And in fact, they had to go to the fast frame by frame photographs to show that he touched the wall a whisker before his inspired opponent. But those photographs also showed something else. At the finish, he was still kicking. His opponent's legs were trailing. The swimmer was Michael Phelps. The race was the 100-meter butterfly in the Beijing Olympics. And that gave Phelps his seventh gold medal. And without it, he would never have gotten 8 gold medals in a single Olympics to create an all-time record. He always had a killer kick. But those weeks and weeks of kicking by the side of the pool gave him muscles he never had. So arguably, a case can be made that breaking his wrist was the best thing that ever happened to him from his athletic career perspective. So whenever something happens to you and you're about to label it bad, just ask yourself, is it true? Is it true that this really is bad? Is it possible? Can I imagine any scenario where X years from now, this could turn out to have been a wonderful thing? Just asking yourself that question moves you to a different emotional domain. And if you then ask the next question, what is it that I can proactively do to make it better? And you move seamlessly from the realm of despair to the realm of possibility. That is how you cultivate extreme resilience. Whenever something happens to you, don't label it bad. Label it, this happened, and then move seamlessly into what do I do now? Over to you, Amit.
Very interesting story, Dr. Rao. And it reminds me, I also sometimes, tell my students or trainees that don't do just feasibility studies. Sometimes it's good to do possibility studies, what all is possible.
Mhm.
Sometimes like you were sharing that, when we look back at incident backwards and when we connect the dot backwards, what seemed, bad at that point of time, we realize the lessons that we learned and, how it was good in, some other ways.
Mhm.
Sometimes I say that life is, made up of two kinds of blessings. One is visible, conspicuous blessings, and the other is blessings in disguise.
That's a wonderful way of putting it, Amit. Yes, dead on.
So, Dr. Rao, you also talk about investing in process and not in the outcome. So, please share a little more on this philosophy.
Absolutely. It goes down to what we talked about earlier, Amit, which is we do not have control, we never had control, we never will have control. A goal is an outcome. We do not have control over it. Any of a number of things can happen to derail us. For example, my wife and I are both tennis fanatics, and we've been to the US Open every year. We've been to the French Open numerous times. The year before last, we went to the Australian Open, and this year we were going to Wimbledon. I bought the tickets a long time ago. And in my head, I had it, perhaps we might not be able to go, but I thought if we don't go, it'll be because, of some personal crisis or a family member fell ill or something like that. I would never even have dreamed that we would not go to Wimbledon because the event would be cancelled and there would be no flights to take to the United Kingdom. Things are out of control, and one of the side blessings, if you will, of the coronavirus is that it has brought it viscerally home to us of how little control we really have. Okay, so every time you set a goal for yourself, recognize that you do not have control. There are any number of factors that could derail you. But here is how we live our lives. I set a goal for myself, I succeeded, life is a blast. I set a goal for myself, I failed, life sucks. We live our lives oscillating on a sinusoidal curve between elation and despair, and we spend more time at the despair end of the spectrum. It is a lousy way to live. There is an alternative, and the alternative is I set a goal, and it could be an ambitious goal, a stretch goal. But having set it, I forget about it because the importance of a goal is that it establishes the direction. Once the direction has been established, forget about it. Instead, pour all of your emotional energy into what are the actions that I can undertake to achieve the goal. When you pour your emotional energy into what are the actions that you can undertake to achieve the goal, and you're detached from the goal itself, two things happen. Number one, you actually start enjoying the journey, and the journey is the only thing you have. The destination is a mirage. You get there, you tarry a few minutes, and you're off someplace else. The journey is with you always. The journey is the only thing you have. So when you pour your emotional energy into that, two things happen. Number one, you start enjoying the journey. And number two, paradoxically, the probability that you will actually get to the outcome you desire, the goal you want to reach, increases. It's paradoxical. But when you detach from the goal, the probability that you will reach it increases exponentially. It's like you're in a negotiation. When you're in a negotiation, do you recognize that you are never in a stronger position than when you are genuinely prepared to walk away? It works the same way in life. There is a goal, you try your level best to reach the goal, but it's okay whether you do or not. You know, people talk about, I want to climb Mount Everest. How much time do you spend on Mount Everest? A few minutes to a half hour max. You get up there, your buddy takes a picture of you, your buddy gets up there, you take a picture of him, and then you're on your way down and you hope you don't get killed by an avalanche. So if you're going to climb Mount Everest, you better enjoy the weeks and months of acclimatization on base camp 1, base camp 2, and so on. It's the same way in life. You have a goal, you try your level best to achieve the goal. If you succeed, fantastic. If you don't succeed, fantastic. Because here is the mistake that all of us make, or certainly the vast majority of us make. We think the benefit of setting a goal and trying our level best to achieve the goal is achieving the goal. Wrong. The benefit of setting a goal and trying our level best to achieve the goal is the learning and growth that happen in us and to us as we try our level best to achieve the goal. If we actually achieve the goal, fantastic. That's a bonus. Be immensely grateful. If we don't achieve the goal because of factors outside our control, the learning and growth have already happened, so we're still ahead of the game. That is what I mean when I say invest in the process, do not invest in the outcome. John Wooden was a very famous basketball coach. He was the first person to reach the Basketball Hall of Fame, both as a player and as a coach. And he used to say, every time I worked with a new team, I never talked about winning or outscoring opponents. I always talked about when it's over and you look in the mirror, did you do the best you were capable of? If you did the best you were capable of, the score really does not matter. But if you did the best you were capable of, I fancy you will find the score to your liking. A perfect articulation. That's why one of the principal building blocks of my program is to get persons to understand that you need to invest in the process, do not invest in the outcome. Over to you, Amit.
Uh, Dr. Rao, we are getting a lot of questions from the audience, so I will ask you the last question and then we will move to the audience questions.
Absolutely.
So my last question to you is, how does one feed the dog and not the world, which you talk about?
That is a very interesting parable, Amit. It comes from the Native American tradition. And it talks about a young man who was growing up and was going to take his place among the adults of the tribe. And the final rite of passage was a conversation with the medicine man. And the medicine man said, here is this dog, kind, intelligent, loving, trustworthy. And here is this wolf, malevolent, vicious, cruel, ready to snap at and kill anything. And the dog and the wolf are fighting, and the dog and the wolf are both inside you. And the young man asks, which one's going to win? And the medicine man says, whichever one you feed. Now think about it. Inside each one of us are altruistic, let's help each other and make the world a better place impulses. And inside each one of us are, let me grab everything I can for myself and to hell with everyone else impulses. And the two are always fighting. It is your job to selectively identify and feed the dog in you. It is also your job to selectively identify and feed the dog in everybody you meet. Very often we feed the wolf and we don't even recognize that we're doing that. We're living in a time of great turmoil. Too many people are defining themselves in terms of us and them. And we are good and noble, and they are evil. They're doing all kinds of horrible things. And you come up with somebody else, and you get into a discussion, and he says, you know what they did? Here's what they did. And you say, yes, and that's not all. They also did this. And you have some camaraderie and you bask in that, but you do not recognize that what you've just done is feed the wolf in yourself as well as the other person. But if instead you go, that's true, that was a terrible thing to have happened, but we all live in this world together, and there is also this other thing that they did, and that promotes the common good. Can we reciprocate? Is there any way in which we can do something so that we are together instead of warring with each other? And now you started feeding the dog. So, this is something that each of us can do in every conversation, every interaction we have with anyone. Ask, did I feed the dog or did I feed the wolf? Did I do something which leaves this person feeling more optimistic about the world, with a greater positive feeling about his or her own life and their role? Do I make this person stronger to face the challenges that he or she has in their life? Or did I do something which innervates them, leaves them feeling more pessimistic about the world, and takes them on a downward spiral? Did I feed the dog or did I feed the wolf? And just by that simple question, in every interaction I have, I'm going to see whether I can feed the dog. And when you do that, you're feeding the dog in you. And when the dog in you becomes friends with the dog in the other person, magic happens in both your lives. So it's a Native American parable. There are many versions of it, but I like the one that I just shared with you. But if you actually implement it, it has powerful ramifications on your life. So, what are the questions we got from the audience, Amit?
Yeah. So Danish asks us this interesting question. If there is no control internally or externally, does that mean you don't do anything about it? Isn't there a contradiction in that theory? You have to also do something to save or change a situation internally or externally. In fact, this question is by Parul. Yeah.
This is a question I get all the time, and absolutely correct. This is what I meant when I said that you accept the situation, including the fact that you don't have any control. But accepting the fact that you don't have any control does not, repeat, not mean you don't do anything about it. As long as you have a vision of the world, you try your level best to change it, to achieve your vision. You may succeed, you may not succeed, but you do try your level best, and who knows, you might succeed. But whether or not you succeed does not have any impact on your emotional well being. That is what I mean by there. So I'm going to try, if it works, fantastic. If it doesn't work, fantastic. The learning and growth will happen in me because I'm investing in the process, not the outcome. But I can't lie and say, I'm not going to invest in the process. I'm going to do nothing. I'm just going to lie over. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
You have to strive and strive mightily, but you strive mightily knowing that the outcome is not under your control and you don't know whether you'll achieve it or not. And whatever happens is fine. You not only accept it, but you embrace it. But the striving is incumbent. You cannot dodge that. What other questions, Amit?
Right. So the second question is in fact from Danish. For a person who is dealing with clinical depression, what's the framework required for resilience?
What's the framework required for?
Resilience. So how can a person who is dealing with clinical depression become resilient?
This is a very, very good question. Now, I am not a medical professional, so what I'm giving you is a lay informed opinion. Sometimes, if you're in clinical depression, it may be necessary to have professional help, including medication. But my personal opinion is depression is nothing but mental chatter which has run amok for so long that it has driven you into a ditch that you cannot climb out of. It's constructed a silo around you so thick you cannot break out of it. So, the very first step is to observe your mental chatter and your thoughts. Most of the problems in our life arise because we identify with our mental chatter and our thoughts, and they therefore take us to all kinds of dark places. But it is possible to separate yourself off and observe your thoughts rather than be carried away from them. And as you do that, you will find that their ability to take you to dark places drops. This is a timeless technique. It is a powerful technique. It works. It is not easy, but it is sure. So you begin with that. In fact, this is one of the foundation exercises in my program. Observe your mental chatter, be a witness, remain anchored in the witness stage, and don't let them grab you and take you away. Because when they grab you and take you away, you're not the observer of your mental chatter, you become your mental chatter. Next, Amit.
Yeah. So the next question, Dr. Rao, is should we keep emotional boundaries with people to be able to protect us from being vulnerable, especially at the workplace? Now, this is an interesting question. Should we be emotional at the workplace, or should we, build boundaries?
Okay. It is a good question. And I would say that you don't necessarily have to build an emotional boundary if you become aware of the fact that you are reacting to what the other person says. You do have to build boundaries, if that's what you choose to call them, in terms of your decision as to what you will or will not share. But apart from that, you don't need to build boundaries. You just need to be aware of what is happening. You need to be aware of your emotions and your reactions. And as you become aware of your emotions and your reactions, you also have a heightened sensitivity and become more aware of the possible reactions, the possible models that the other person is using. And as you do that, you can behave appropriately. So I stress the most important quality you have, and this cuts across whether you are in a professional career situation or you're in a personal home and outside your career situation, is awareness. Become aware of where your emotions are arising and where they are taking you, and be proactive in terms of deciding, do I want to go there, do I not want to go there, as opposed to reactive and instinctual. Next topic.
Yeah. Dr. Rao, the last question that we are taking. Everyone has different emotional capacities. Are there any quick parameters to figure out a person's pressure taking capacity?
I would say that that question itself is probably not worth asking. And the reason it's not worth asking is change can happen, and change can happen pretty dramatically. Because most of the time, when we talk about we have a different capacity for that, it's because we are ignorant. Let me give you an example, and this is a classic Vedantic example. It comes, in so many times, in so many fashions, in various wisdom traditions. There is a person, and he is terrified. He's going on a road at night, and he's terrified because he sees a snake in front of him. And this terror could stay a long time until one day somebody shines a lamp on that snake, and it turns out it is a rope. And all of a sudden, the fear leaves completely. So, your job is to recognize that is not a snake on the road, that is a rope. And the moment you do that, the fear goes off. So, whenever we're talking about people don't have the capacity to understand. All we're talking is that they have a misunderstanding of the situation that they are confronting. And once you reframe that, the problem disappears. So I would say you ought to devote your attention to recognizing that it is a rope on the path, not the snake. And when you do that, the question becomes irrelevant. Spend your time, your effort in understanding. See that it is a rope and not a snake. Do we have time for more questions or are we done, Amit?
Uh, we are through with the time, Dr. Rao. So I would like to sum up, your session. And I think your session reminds me of a quote one of my friends had shared. What cannot be cured must be endured. So if it has to be endured, let us do it cheerfully because we can't do anything about it. Interesting mental models you have shared. I really like the thought of, whether we are telling disempowering stories to ourselves or empowering stories to ourselves. So I think I have a lot of takeaways for myself, and I hope the audience also has, a lot of takeaways. I hope, everyone found the masterclass inspiring and life changing. Uh, so I would, share with everyone that please stay in touch with us through the social media pages of Dr. Rao and the Outstanding Speakers Bureau or POSB. So stay blessed, stay safe. Thank you.